Briefly, Jacques Godbout was born in Montreal in 1933, as evidenced by his small feet. He has attended Collège Brébeuf. Nobody's perfect. And then, yes?
I've just discovered in the document that I was born in 1934.
I see November 2nd. Jacques, born on November 2nd, 1934.
Jacques, I am younger than I thought. And this was signed during Bourras's custody. Yeah, he is my friend. I will have to verify, but my mother is dead. What to do?
Yeah.
There's a problem. Go on.
Okay, then we don't see in which hospital you were born. Do you know which hospital it is?
I will check.
Okay. Well then, you are 1 year younger than we thought, but you can still benefit from all...
I'm an octogenarian anyway.
The advantages. Yes, there you go. So, Collège Brébeuf, small pun, nobody's perfect. Then University of Montreal, where he obtains a baccalaureate and a master's degree, thanks to a memoir on Rimbaud. He then heads to Addis Ababa, capital of Ethiopia. We will come back to this later, a surprising choice. There, he teaches philosophy and French for a few years. Then, in 1958, he returns home and starts working for the National Film Board, where he becomes a scenarist, producer, film editor, and director of French productions. Between 1961 and 2009, Jacques Godbout made 31 films, such as Kid Sentiment and IXE13, two films that had an impact on my childhood. I did not learn this afternoon that I have become 1 year younger, and so my youth is the same as people of my age. At the same time, my guest was pursuing a remarkable career as a poet, novelist, essayist, and literary critic. L'Aquarium, Salut Galarno, Les Têtes à Papineau, La Concierge du Panthéon, to name only a few titles representing a production of more than 60 years. Jacques Godbout has received numerous prizes. The Governor General's Award, the Duvernay Award, which made you particularly proud at the time, and of which you must still be very proud.
Yes, Merenti de Patria.
The Patria, yes, absolutely. Athanas David Prize from the Quebec's government. You also hold an honorary doctorate from McGill, Ottawa, and UQAM. Did I forget anything?
No, it's accurate.
Good. The Jacques Godbout collection of Library and Archives Canada bears the very romantic name of Collection R11744LMS0157. It is composed of 16 meters of textual documents with almost 1,000 photos, 145 audio-visual documents, and 7 paintings, since Jacques Godbout possesses every talent. These documents cover the period from his birth to 2014. A real gold mine for the researchers and the students, a mine that formed over 6 deposits between 1989 and 2014, thus making him a devotee of Library and Archives Canada. It is, of course, one of the most impressive literary archive collection in French that we have, and I would like to take the opportunity to thank the current administrator of the collection, our colleague and friend Stéphane Lang, who is with us today in the first row. Mr. Godbout, first of all, I would like to thank you for having accepted our invitation. To begin with, welcome to Ottawa. I was a bit worried for you, wondering if you left too early this morning. Because in 1962, in an interview, and we have the proof here, it's an interview from the Parisian newspaper Libération, you were reported as saying that distance between Montreal and Ottawa is of 500 kilometers.
Merely.
And that they switched the menus in the dining cars at the border. So you've left this morning.
And there was fog.
Yes.
I find that, I don't know if I said it, or if it's the journalist who invented it, but I find that it is a superb metaphor about the distance felt between life in Montreal and life in Ottawa in those days. I think that indeed, at the time, we were at about more than 500 kilometers. And we had to go to Hull, next to Quebec, to find good restaurants.
I can reassure you on this issue, but we don't have the time during lunchtime.
Things have changed.
Yes.
There are brothels on both sides.
I know nothing about that. Restaurants, yes, and good ones too. So the story is that it was Roger Lemelin, author of The Plouffe Family and The Crime of Ovid Plouffe, for the younger, who convinced you to give your archive to the LAC.
Yes, Roger Lemelin, Mordecai Rickler, and I were invited to meet people from the national capital. They were worried of the little public traffic at the time. The people were just not coming, etc. And they wanted to know if we had any suggestions on how to encourage young families to come here, in Ottawa, for a few days. I remember walking in front of the National Library as they said, "Listen, they even took the costumes of the characters in the Plus family. Jacques, you have to give them your stuff. Don't give that to the Americans." So it was Mr. Lemoyne, who I think was responsible for manuscripts at the time, who contacted me. This is how our love story started. For the manuscript of Salut Galarno.
And it was, which is on display if you have the curiosity to see it in that condition.
It was a real manuscript, as a matter of fact.
Yes, indeed. On an 8.5-inch by 14-inch graph paper, right? So when we read your first works, L'Aquarium, Le Couteau sur la Table, Salut Galarno, which we talked about and which is actually the manuscript we see, we clearly feel the identity problems encountered in the 1960s. When we read the critics, we sometimes call you Canadian, sometimes Canadian-French, at times even French-Canadian, and the icing on the cake is the Canard Enchaîné, a journal that is not serious, of course, but I will cite its criticism. It says it doesn't talk about you but of Galarno. It remains to be seen. So it says Galarno does not have to become French citizen. He is by language, by heart. Moreover, he is bilingual, which enables him to measure how French he is. This part I didn't understand. You neither, I believe. But when we call you French-Canadian and Canadian-French, when you leave University of Montreal in 1954, how do you define yourself?
The identity question is a question that is still constantly present, specifically for people speaking French, but perhaps also for those speaking English and living under the United States pressure. I was born in, I thought it was 1933, but it could be in 1934. When I was born, I was Canadian. At least my father was. After the war, around 1945, we became Canadian-French, which was easier. There were French-Canadian, then the Anglos, who finally became English-Canadian. But we still have to, as this identity question is always defined in regards to others, they have to know who we are, and we have to know who they see with their eyes. Towards the beginning of the 1960s, we had this crazy idea amongst writers to say, well, the notion of Canadian French is way too vast. It covers the entirety of a land between two oceans. We will say Quebecers. We did not consult the people from the city of Quebec. We probably should, as if they would have almost certainly said no. But we assumed that Quebec as a province would be the term describing us. It has slowly evolved. You all know it. It is all from Quebecer to Francophone Quebecer throughout time. But in 1981 to 85, we became native Francophone Quebecer. The native-born Quebecers of French-Canadian origin with North American Francophone roots. I believe that we will arrive to a definition this morning. It will be complex as the reality of all individuals living today in a constantly changing world. In France, I was received as a Canadian writer, as a Quebecer, and when they would say French, it's that there was absolutely no hierarchical distance with the French literary sphere. I have never felt neither small nor big. I felt at ease with them. They've greeted me in a splendid way, really.
But it appears to me, obviously I wasn't there regrettably, but it seems to me that in the case of your whole work, the identity question is raised even more often due to the fact that, and I don't know how it happened, you will tell us, you have published your work with a French publisher, with Éditions du Seuil to be more precise.
Yes, well, listen. I am like everybody else. Everyone from my generation, we follow a pattern. We start with poetry, we are 12, 13, 14 years old. We start by writing poems, and then we start a magazine. At Liberté magazine, we wrote prose to solve the world's problems, and then we think, I could write a novel. I was working at the film board, already in a sector where we did a French adaptation of English films, and Annie Bear came to visit us. Annie Bear's first job was at the film board here in Ottawa. So she had friends at the film board in Montreal. She came to visit us, and I took the opportunity. I kidnapped her for a few hours to ask her how the publication of Chambre de Bois went with Seuil. She told me lots of nice things about the publishing house. She talked about Paul Flamand, who was the director. That same winter, Paul Flamand, the director, comes to Canada. He stops in Montreal. For 2 months, I've been a director of Liberté magazine before being laid off. While I was a director, I had the chance to invite Flamand and others to a meeting in Montreal. Robert Hillier was the director of the School of Fine Arts. I give these details so you can see the pattern. Robert Hillier, the novelist, was director of the School of Fine Arts, and he was the one with the huge office, almost as big as your office here. So I told myself that it would be a great place to reunite people. There was no other particular place we could go to, and there was no way we were going to meet in a pub, so there was a contact. But my completed manuscript on L'Aquarium, there was no photocopy machine at the time. There was carbon paper with which you could obtain 4 copies. It's enough because if you make a mistake, you have to correct it on all 4 pages. So in a nutshell, I should content myself with 4 copies. I sent one to a competition organized by the Cercle de Livres de France. Pierre Tisserie was the editor. I've just sent my manuscript to this competition that I rely on, and I receive a letter that is not addressed to me, but the letter is in an envelope addressed to me. In fact, I just received a letter addressed to the winner, which said, "My dear."
Just so everyone can follow, despite its name, the Cercle du Livre de France.
It's a publishing house in Montreal, but obviously it was a woman who was won, and I was pretty naive. So I put this behind me, and I told myself, oh, there is Jacques Godbout from Édition Le Jour. I went to see him, he had a look at the first few pages, and he said, "You're crazy. You send a bishop to the brothel right in the beginning? I cannot publish this. Bishop Léger will close my business." I told him he cannot be serious, he's brought to listen, he's controlling us. Without wasting any time, I immediately placed the last 2 exemplaries in envelopes, one to Juilliard, who was also holding a literary competition, the other to Seuil. And at Seuil, you sent me a telegram saying, "We will take your book, come." And that is how I first published at Seuil. It made a splash here, because there were no authors being published apart from Annie Bear, and I've continued to work with them because the contract stipulated that we commit ourselves to send the next 3 manuscripts consecutively, and immediately. The contract expired in 2000 or something.
So this was not a deliberate act on your part. It was slightly due to chance. In other words, if...
No, it is not due to chance. It is due to the nonsense happening in Quebec. From one side you have the clergy, from the other corruption. I was in a perfect Catholic French-Canadian world, and it's through the French publishing house that I managed to get away, yes.
Yeah, so it was a bad choice of words when I said by chance. What I really meant to say was that it wasn't a deliberate action from your part to publish your work in France.
No, I have published my first collections of poems in France because, while I was in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, France was closer to me than Canada. At the time, right in Canada was 4 weeks. So 4 weeks to go and 4 weeks to come back in order to answer a question, that was way too far. There was no telephone, so I chose France, which was much closer, and it went very well with Séguers. Maybe so you considered that I had to continue because I had started Cigars, but I felt more comfortable in France than in Quebec at the time.
All right, I incidentally have a quote from Gilles Marcotte, who wrote at the time of L'Aquarium's publication, "Finally, a young French-Canadian novelist writing in a Parisian style. I have then asked myself if the fact that your work was coming from Seuil was inciting him to think that you had a Parisian style, or is it the opposite?"
No. It's the writing. When L'Aquarium got published, we left the traditional psychological or sociological novel, and L'Aquarium is a novel which, as Anne Hebert's Les Chambres de Bois, belongs to the transition from poetry to novel, if you will. And this is the kind of book being written in Paris at the time. It is therefore the text modernity which makes him say that, and as an evidence of this, I can tell you that right after the book got published, I got a phone call from the son of Jacques Godbout. I don't know if he's familiar to you, a novelist a bit older than me. He said, "Godbout, I would like to invite you for lunch. We need to see each other." I was flattered and intrigued at the same time. I essentially went to eat with him, and the question he asked me was, "What do you do to be so modern?" If you see books from Basset, he stopped writing in a traditional way and became extremely modern, if you will.
And so there was a recipe?
There was a recipe, yes.
That you gave him?
Well, it was quite simple. Write whatever you want. Stop subjecting yourself to traditions, structures. Create the books you feel like creating.
And this is what is meant to write in a Parisian fashion?
Yes, that is what it meant. Not to bend before tradition, if you will. I think. But in my case, it was a natural process. And we probably need to make a distinction between my generation and the generation 10 or 15 years younger than me. In my generation, we were in college studying French and only French literature. Not a single book from Quebec, or even a Canadian French book. Not even Gabriel Roy was on the program. Nothing. It was only French. I moved from being a French literature reader to being a French literature writer. And in Paris, I felt at ease in the same path. Those who came after were entitled to be initiated to Quebecer literature. And what actually helped me career-wise, if we can talk about a career in the case of a writer, is that the teachers teaching in the 1960s, 1970s started choosing one or two Quebecer books when they gave literature classes in college, in high schools. I was in the program. I barely finished writing a book that the book was already in the curriculum. I became a classic in class, unwillingly, but I wasn't angry because it enabled the circulation of books. And if a book had done well in France and had done well here, it would continue to circulate. Salut Garlano is still part of the school's curriculum today. So I have published at least 250,000 books, which is huge compared to the usual number of publications.
Of course.
The book was used in Africa. It was also used in Europe for civilization and Francophony classes.
Oh, well, I can relate to that. Last week I had a radio interview as regards to our interview of today, and I said Salut Galarno, which is a book, and they stopped me by saying I've studied it in college. It is still the case, so...
It was fantastic. You know, with the earnings of the theater adaptation of Salut Galarno, I have bought an ancestral house on the shores of Lake Champlain. I therefore visit the United States quite often, and it once happened that I had a few bottles in my car, and I didn't want to be seen being addressed by the customs officer saying, "Godbout, you have written Salut Galarno, did you?" I said, "Yeah, so let's proceed."
It has a purpose. It was a theater play, and was there a song from Beau Dommage or...
Beau Dommage did, yes. On the edge of the dock in Châteauguay.
Oh, really? Does it belong to
Les
you?
pieds dans l'eau.
So,
You can sing it, you know it.
I could, but after. This is still recorded for prosperity. I'm a bit wary. So this is the first vector. He's an author, he is French, he is contemporary, the other...
He's not French, he remains.
Well, according to the...
Alright.
Galarno is French, not you. The other vector obviously examined, questioned, and constantly brought up at the time was joual. The use of joual, it's not overused in your work, but in Galarno we can find lots of words like esti, Quebec French profanity, and stuff like that.
That is not joual. It is popular Quebec French, but it's not joual. Joual is a disease of French, which is a replica of badly digested English, if you will.
Yeah.
Joual is it was first defined by Brother something Desbian as being a way of saying whale instead of cheval. He has given a great example of it in a dictation. He was teaching at Lac Saint-Jean, I believe, somewhere over there. He was given O Canada as a dictation to his students. O Canada, our home and native land, your story is a great saga. And the students wrote, your story is not bad. The text written by those students and the way of talking of some biased people exasperated him. They were of Marxist-Leninist obedience, and most of them had never even read Lenin or Marx. But they decided that joual was the language of the people, and therefore it had to be used. So some authors of the biased theme theoretically tried to create novels in joual, which wasn't a tremendous success. As a matter of fact, during the Quiet Revolution, as you know, there was not much bloodshed. There were a few deaths, but we can actually count them on our fingers. The Quiet Revolution was a popular anti-aristocracy revolution, and in Quebec, the aristocrats were all those working for Radio Canada. The counts or dukes were the people talking on Radio Canada. The accent of Radio Canada. The language of Radio Canada was an element that annoyed those who wanted to impose another language, the joual, or a popular language. This could easily be done in theater, since the characters have to speak the language of their environment. It's normal. So if you have a scene involving a garagist, he will not communicate like they do at Radio Canada, and The Revenge, the Quiet Revolution, ended the language of Radio Canada. The first person to send a strong message was Michel Tremblay with Les Belles Sœurs.
L'intéressant, c'est que les homosexuels utilisent toujours les femmes comme porte-parole.
What is very interesting is that homosexuals always use women as spokespersons. Not always, but very frequently. And Les Belles Sœurs' arrival was meant for us to question the language, which according to him was not the one we were supposed to speak. This was a debate that sometimes took us to the stables, and at times to the academy. We never knew which way to go. In my case, it wasn't my language. It wasn't the language of my family. It wasn't the language of my ancestors or my kids. I found it very useful, but not very viable from a literary point of view. But it caused, we sure enough had never-ending quarrels. Joual has been, we can say, that we spoke without ever. I had a former prime minister great-uncle who was beaten because he ate horse meat. So without even ever eating horse meat, joual became a subject of dispute for a very long time, and then it withered away.
scénaristes de longs métrages de fiction.
Feature film scenarists continued to use it often without realizing that the population became much more educated than before. They make their film characters speak like garages from the 1960s, while they are very well aware that even policemen go to college now anyways.
The bottom line of this story is, quote by Jean-Étienne Blais, we have quoted quite often from Le Devoir. I am not sure if it accurately represents those years. Anyway, Jean-Étienne Blais writes in Le Devoir newspaper, Mr. Jacques Godbout, is it Joël or not? He says no, it's not. And he says, Mr. Jacques Godbout has the French spirit. What he writes is French, his laugh is Gallic, let's all laugh with him. So, end of chapter.
Feel free to laugh.
So, since we spoke a lot about the Quiet Revolution, Duplessis and everything he represents, there is a kind of revisionist wave I witnessed from up close because we have created a series about the Quiet Revolution in the Great Library, and people used to say, well, the Great Darkness is actually a vision of the mind. It wasn't as dark as we imagined it to be. The Quiet Revolution is not a real rupture. And you, I remember quite well that you didn't have any patience for this revisionist vision, and again a text was published in Le Devoir newspaper, but more recently in September 2010, you have named it Pour éclairer la grande noirceur, to enlighten the great darkness, and in it, you really blamed those who wanted to rehabilitate the Duplessis period. I just want to remind you your conclusion because as I am myself a historian, your conclusion really hit me. So I quote what you said. History cannot be written based on documents. It sometimes has to be lived. So for you, the Duplessis era, you took it at face value. You have lived it. You have felt it intimately.
You cannot even understand to which extent. I am from the age of from memory. From age 8 to 9 until I left the family house, we used to talk about Duplessis every single night. My father was an agronomist. The Minister of Agriculture was Jacques Godbout, his uncle, who became Prime Minister shortly after. We were politics. We ate politics. We were conscript members of the Liberal Party right from the beginning, and everything, including Duplessis' corruption, was reviewed in fine detail while we were eating. Well, I had a certain knowledge of that period's decay, but there is worse. They were trying to correct history in the Soviet Union. We even know now that they managed to take off people from photos doing Photoshop. We just lived 10 years under Mr. Harper. It's probably hard to imagine to which extent this guy has imposed a lead blanket over thinking, reasoning, knowledge, research. In 10 years, he has succeeded in silencing people. It's not great darkness, it's a lead blanket which was slowly destroying even the biggest research centers. In 10 or 20 years, I bet there will be people saying, after all, Harper wasn't that bad, you know, he didn't do much harm from an economical point of view, and he was right not to like Obama too much. Obama was overrated, he was. I believe that 10 or 20 years, people will want to correct that. But if you have lived through the 10 years under Harper, you will very likely know that it was an insidious, secretive period, and there will be no sufficing statistics, books, or text to tell that story. Recounting the story of the Great Darkness from a humanism point of view, that's one thing. We can say that good old Duplessis did spend a lot of money. Duplessis gave to his province. The liberals gave to strangers. These were the slogans at the time. But as a matter of fact, Duplessis was also a lead blanket, and it wasn't just him. It was his whole government, namely the Roman Catholic Church. The chief minister was Cardinal Léger, before him other cardinals.
le Québec vivait
Quebec was living since about 1840 with a Catholic government.
un gouvernement catholique.
Not only with the government officials, but a Catholic government where the Catholic thinking was involved in everything.
Investissait tout. Moi, quand
When I became 16, 17 years old, I had only one thing in mind: to get the hell out of here. I couldn't stay. I had to leave. I actually went away with friends to Mexico when I was 16 years old. After that, I joined the Canadian Army, thinking that it would at least take me out of Quebec.
dehors du Québec, au moins,
I did everything to leave, and this is why, eventually, after university, I escaped and I didn't want to come back.
je me suis tiré.
I didn't come back before 4 to 5 years, finally.
Je suis pas
Then you make a very surprising choice because there are others like you leaving for the same reasons. I am now thinking of Berthiaume, but they go to Paris and you go to Addis Ababa. What brings you there?
Well, I always believed that life was like that game.
comme un jeu
With the electric ball, pinball, you never know where the ball will land. I'm in university, I work at the Quartier Latin,
qui est le journal
which is the student's journal. Haile Selassie, the Ethiopian emperor, was visiting Montreal for his doctoral degree.
pour un doctorat honoris causa. Et
And someone advised me to prepare an interview with him.
alors je pars et vraiment.
I went without much preparation, and what can I say or ask the emperor?
Qu'est-ce que je peux dire et demander à l'empereur? Alors je lui demande comment.
I ask him how it's like in his country. He tells me, come and see. I said, great idea. How do I do it?
Ben, il dit, il y a des gens là à côté qui.
Well, he says, there are some people nearby who can hire you as a professor if you want. So I needed to fill out the forms, which I
des
did.
formulaires, ce que j'ai fait.
As I was seeing a young woman who was also studying art, but who was engaged to a strange guy in notarial studies,
Un zigoto qui était en études de notariat.
who seemed much more serious than me, I thought it would be a great asset for me to invite her for a trip to Europe and the other side of the world,
Grand voyage en Europe jusqu'au bout du monde.
and that this could be useful to me, and it was indeed.
Le problème qui se posait, c'était
The problem I faced now was still the damn religious problem since I was a believer,
et que ça se savait très bien et que c'était
and it was known at the time that Jesuits were the coordinators to hire professors here.
pour engager les professeurs ici. Il fallait que je devienne.
I had to redeem myself, so I found a solution.
Trouvé comme solution, il y avait
In one of the University of Montreal classes, there was an American Jesuit, Canadian English,
américain.
sorry, an American who spoke English but wanted to learn French. I have offered to give him 3 classes every
Lui
week.
a offert des cours gratuitement toutes les semaines.
It's not that it amused me, but I thought if I owned this trust of a Jesuit, I will pull through. Actually, he has guaranteed my morality to the others in the community.
Auprès des autres et de la communauté.
I therefore signed the contract you have right before you.
Exactly.
On m'a
They
donné
gave me a
des
plane
avions
ticket
pour
for
aller
Addis
deux billets
Ababa,
d'avion parce que
2
j'allais
plane
travailler.
tickets because we had to be married. This also played well for me.
J'ai pu épouser madame. Et j'ai vendu
I got
des
married and I
avions
sold the
et on est
plane
parti,
tickets.
en
We traveled by
bateau et
boat, by
en
train,
avion,
on foot, and we have traveled for 3 months before arriving in
d'arriver
Ethiopia in
en
September.
septembre, en Éthiopie. Je devais enseigner
I was supposed to teach a high school, but someone had fallen ill, and I could draw you a list of people falling ill at the right moment in my life.
Qui sont tombés malades au bon moment. C'est extraordinaire. Alors, j'ai donc pris
I took over the philosophy class at University College, and that's how.
University College. Et c'est comme ça que
And you stayed there 2 years, I believe.
3 years.
3 years.
3 years, we went hunting. I wasn't a great professor, I have to confess, because teaching means repeating, insisting, going back, and there's nothing that I hate more than repeating the same things over and over again.
les mêmes choses dehors. J'étais pas vraiment très
So I wasn't that good, but it gave me time to
pour
write.
écrire. J'étais
I was in a
dans une
fantastic
maison
office at
ordinaire,
University College.
au University
We had incredibly
College,
modern
des
offices,
bureaux
this
très
part of
modernes,
Addis Ababa,
partie là d'Addis Abeba. Et
and
j'étais
I
le
was
fils
with Sylvia Pankhurst's son. Sylvia Pankhurst is the lady who started the suffragettes in England approximately in the 1910s, 1912. And Sylvia Pankhurst has decided that with her head and the strong body of a man, she could produce an extraordinary child. She therefore went to the London docks and has chosen a sailor, conceived a child, and that was the same child who worked with me in the office. He had the head of his mother and the body of his mother. But he was very pleasant, intelligent, curious. It was a fabulous environment because in Addis Ababa there were refugees from all over the world, mostly refugees running away from communism, Polish and other, who developed fantasies abroad just like me. As I was francophone and my wife still had her French passport at the time, we were close to the French embassy, of the people working and doing research in Institut Pasteur. It was an exciting milieu, quite a decentering and life experience.
From there, we can talk about Carton Pâte, your first poem manuscript, which under circumstances you have already explained, for proximity reasons, you have sent to Segers and they accepted to publish you. Then what makes you decide to come home? Did you anticipate the death of Duplessis? Because he is not yet dead. You are coming back 1 year before.
No, it was another 3 years contract, which seemed to me much too long. We had a child, I started to be bored. I don't like staying in one place for too long. 3 years maximum, and I decided to start a doctoral thesis in Paris, like you.
Yeah?
But in your case, it was about food.
Yeah, it's not my interview, it's yours. Indeed.
But I have.
On ancient Greek cuisine.
Ancient Greek cuisine. I have found it interesting because in the end my thesis was Salut Galarno, and that too is on cuisine.
Undeniably. Hot dogs.
In a certain way. So I decided to do my doctoral thesis there, but in 1900, so we are in 1957-58, and the Université Française is a disaster. It's old, it's dirty, the teachers are old and dirty. After 4 or 5 months, I said enough. So we sell our car that we just bought, we take our luggage, and since my wife she came from Haiti, we moved to Port-au-Prince, where I thought I would maybe not have a career, but settle a little bit. But when we arrived, the elections were taking place, and the elections in Haiti are traditionally not very quiet. I spent a great amount of time in the basement while Father Duvalier was shooting above us with a machine gun. We managed to live quietly for a short period of time, but it soon became unbearable. Duvalier took power, we ran for our lives, and we came back to Canada, where I had a good friend, a journalist and a poet, Gilles Constantino, who greeted me, who greeted us, who made us visit the city. And we found that Montreal was alive and life continued. I looked for a new job for quite some time. When you were not a Catholic, you couldn't teach. So I was banned from teaching at all levels. Primary, high school, college, it didn't matter. I found myself with a job in advertisement. And there, luck helped me because I was working with a guy called André Dallemagne. He was a passionate for Laurentian. He wanted to create the Republic of Laurentia or relocate the Prince of Bourbon in Quebec. He had a passion for the past and independence. I don't think I have ever laughed as much as in those 6 months with him. It was because André Dallemagne's political fantasy dreams partly came true with the RIN. It was a gem. because I have always remained a liberal, so I am very suspicious of these things.
And now, how do you find yourself at the NFB? You don't have a career in cinema. You have no experience in cinema.
No, I did have a career. I often went to cinemas. I love cinema. No, it's via Liberté magazine. The guy's founder of the magazine and a woman, Michel Lalonde. We saw each other pretty regularly. André Belot worked for, we used to call it the personnel department in those days, now we call it human resources. So he was then in human resources. He arrived one night at the magazine meeting. He said, "Listen, we are looking for someone to translate English films in French. Is there anyone interested?" We were five to say yes. Me, Michel van Sandel, and another poet, Fernand Ouellet, another poet, etc. And we all went to the film board. We all underwent translation and adaptation tests. I bluffed a little. I said I knew everything about cinema because we were doing advertising. It's true, I was doing the Imperial Esso ads for the Saturday Night Hockey games, but that's not much of cinema. Anyway, I said I have done it, that I knew how it was done. I bluffed, but I didn't want to go because it was situated on Côte de Liesse. It was dirty, it was ugly, and it was far. I really didn't want to go, and this is why they offered me the job. I believe that they wanted to insist. They thought that with me, everything would go better, and I got this opportunity. Do you see on this photo in the extreme, on my left? I don't know for you, I'm in the center with Mrs. Baudoin. To my right is Georges Dufault, who was cameraman, and on the other extremity is Guy Roberge. Guy Roberge, who was President Director General of the Film Office de Film and who was deputy under Jacques Godbout. So we were meeting quite often in the restrooms, and we had these extraordinary political conversations. And when my application arrived, he asked for me, and I had... It probably gave me a helping hand to get in. I don't know.
And then, during that period, you are
official adapter of all English movies that are appealing. It was an extraordinary opportunity to learn about film editing, to learn the rhythm of the thing, and sometimes we would have to shoot footage to replace the ones we didn't need, which were impossible to translate from English to French. So it was a school of adaptation. And that's how I managed to learn the stuff. And this whole thing with a bunch of amazing people I talked to you about earlier started. And one thing led to another. I became a producer because of it.
And then for years, you are what would now be called multi-platform. Now you are a filmmaker, you are an author, theater, television, magazine, cinema, fiction, novel.
Yes, radio, yes.
Do you have all the skills, or was it a necessity by force of circumstances?
No, so all of this is actually a variation around one theme. Talking into a microphone on radio or being on a television show. There are minor corrections to make, but it's not much. Producing a film or writing a novel, they require different techniques, but you can practice them if we are somewhat flexible. But mostly you cannot live from only one. If I remember correctly, a salary at the film board at the time was approximately $5,000.
Per year, it has to be mentioned.
Of course. Oh yes, some people earn this amount per month nowadays. At the time it was very little. I had a child and the second was on the way. My wife was staying at home because she didn't like schools very much and she had to compensate. I therefore had to take care of 4 people. I had to write, collect, copyright on the novels, and participate in a weekly show on the radio. I was doing editorials for the news, that didn't last long. I was fired, but I was preparing editorial for Radio Canada News. I was also writing for magazines. When Maclean's was born in French, it was Pierre de Bellefeuille who was the director. He knew me. He asked me if I wanted to get into that. I have never left. Mes clients became l'actualité. I am still there. But all this time, it was to add, to grease the wheels a little. But in an amazing way, because every time it's exciting to take a new medium and use it to create what we want, or to what we want to say, or hoping to have the ability to say. Therefore, multi-platform, yes.
There are not many. I'm trying to think, but nowadays there are not many people being filmmakers and novelists at the same time. I can't say.
People don't have a choice today. They are specialized involuntarily. You are not easily forgiven to have more than one capacity. They specialize you very rapidly. Firstly at school, they ask very young children to choose a domain, and then in universities, then at the workplace. When you hire people today, you ask them to be very good in one sector and not be a jack of all trades. In my case, Godbout, jack of all trades, is true. I have always been that way, but in an era where freedom was everywhere. The Quiet Revolution was not only a government change, it was a general opening up where anybody could do anything with or without success. There were no taboos, no limits, and no censorship. We have fought against it. It was a period. Fidel Castro once said that other Cubans have also attempted to have a revolution in Cuba, but he was the one who arrived at the right time. Without comparing myself to Fidel Castro, far from it, I can say that I was born at the right time and I arrived at the right moment, which is in the years where everything was possible. It's not my fault.
There is an important episode, no pun intended, towards the middle of the end of the 1970s that has really touched you. It's Hubert Aquin's suicide.
Ouch.
You have even dedicated a film called Deux épisodes to Aquin, another word game, on 2 episodes of Hubert Aquin's life, and you are one of the 6 persons. We have this letter showcased. It doesn't look like much, but it is a letter that Aquin has written you before ending his days, and I must admit when I read the beginning of the message, it has profoundly troubled me. I find it quite disturbing. I'm not sure you can read it. I will help you. It says, "My dear Jacques, I am happy with my wife, proud of my son Emmanuel, and very pleased with the entire socio-political stir happening in Quebec. However, I will commit suicide while being, I believe, relatively sane." This message, you receive it. He has already committed suicide or...
Same day.
Okay, so it is too late. You can't do anything.
But this is pure Hubert Aquin, to surprise, to amaze. You have a beautiful picture of him there, the one where he dances. He was charming and provocative at the same time. He had a stupendous intelligence that never ceased functioning. But he was also a boy suffering from deep depression. He was probably manic depressive, so he went from uplifting euphoric periods to periods of total depression. He had threatened to commit suicide a long time ago. People didn't take him seriously, hoping that it wasn't serious. But then all of a sudden it happened. If you watch the movie Deux épisodes dans la vie d'Hubert Aquin, you'll have a good idea of the context in which it happened. I held a conference shortly after his suicide. At first we were very close to each other for different reasons. And we lived almost next to each other. I took care of... When he was imprisoned and confined at the time, they were suing him for a terrorist attack. I took care of collecting money for his children. There was a community life, and at Libraire we could feel his presence in a significant way. I felt that when he committed suicide, it became a temptation to which many young writers wanted to succumb to.
il y avait une espèce de
A
dépression.
certain kind of depression set in, and I told myself, wow,
Je me suis dit, oh, il faut
people
pas
cannot think that someone who commits suicide only takes his
le
life.
fait que prendre sa vie,
He takes his life and ours
prend
too.
notre vie aussi. Un être qui se
A
suicide
being who commits suicide leaves with a part of us, and not only that, he wants you to feel guilty for his departure.
d'être parti.
He wants you to know that he has chosen to leave, and that if you have done
Que si vous
something,
aviez peut-être fait quelque chose,
tried
osé
something,
quelque
said
chose,
something, offered
dit
something,
quelque
then
chose,
maybe he wouldn't have
offert
committed
quelque chose,
suicide.
il serait peut-être pas suicidé. Il y a toujours
This is
ça
always
dans
the
notre
ambiguity of
société qui est un
suicide.
petit peu,
Suicide is
je
always
ne
a bit
voulais
dangerous,
pas
and I didn't
que
want that.
les-
I didn't want the idea of
l'idée
suicide
de
becoming the
faire
way out for Canadian
au
French
bout de la
fatigue,
fatigue, la
something
grande
he has
fatigue
talked about in a
dont
text that
j'avais
continued to
parlé,
be quoted,
et qui était
but which at the
très
time had even
mais
more
qui à
importance.
l'époque avait encore plus d'importance. Et c'est ce pourquoi j'ai fait le film,
That is why I
en
made the
allant
film,
chercher
by looking
des
for
témoins,
witnesses, including his wife at the end of the
à la fin
movie,
du film, qui expliquent très
who
bien
explains how it
comment
happened
c'est
very clearly, somewhat
pour
diffusing his
diffuser
temptation to
un peu
commit
la
suicide.
tentation du suicide.
Yet, his letter is like he was trying to avoid blaming others, avoid imposing this culpability by saying, my wife, my son.
Oh
Ah
yes,
oui, oui, mais
but the person who committed suicide, he's not the only one in my life, eh?
le
The person who
suicidé ne
commits
vient pas
suicide
par
does
force,
not attack you, he
il
leaves.
part.
He acts when
Il pose
facing
un acte
difficulty of living,
devant une difficulté de vivre qui fait en sorte que vous
which
vous
makes you
demandez,
think,
moi,
but me, who am I? A coward? A weakling?
un pleutre,
Don't I have difficulties of living as well? Should I not eliminate myself as well? He doesn't need you. It is not him who blames you, it is the feeling of
la
guilt you.
culpabilité, c'est la même chose pour
Same goes for Claude Jutra, who has committed suicide because he was suffering of Alzheimer's.
et les
Aren't the
gens
people, when he committed suicide, the people ask themselves, why didn't we keep him in an institution? Why didn't we take care of him? He didn't leave thinking that you have abandoned him. It's us still being alive who feels things this way.
nous sentons comme ça.
It's probably the same kind of guilt people with kids feel when they lose a young child.
Les gens qui ont des enfants qui meurent
There are terrible tragedies
il y
of
a
this
des
kind.
drames épouvantables de ce type. Alors c'était
So it was a tragedy, and that's
et
it.
puis ben voilà.
So, Salut Galarno is published. I make a parenthesis because we keep skipping from one thing to the next, but
May I just add something?
yeah.
Hubert and I have taken the two possible paths of the Quiet Revolution of
La
1960.
révolution tranquille en 1960.
I have chosen declericalization by creating the new LAIC movement.
Lui a choisi
He has chosen political independence with the RIN party. And this is what separated us intellectually. And this is what separated us all our lives. For the rest, we were pretty much always agreeing.
nous étions d'accord.
So, Salut Galarno, your third novel is published in 1967, and I imagine that you didn't see it coming. But as you mentioned earlier, it became a popular hit instantly.
Yeah,
We sometimes see it on screen, translated in English, Russian, Spanish, German, Gaelic, and Japanese. I hope I don't forget too many languages.
there's a lady now who's translating it in Czech.
Oh, really?
She has a lot of trouble with it.
We can see here, speaking of Russian and Japanese, I remember arriving in Kyoto in a university. There was a Canadian Studies Center, and the person who greeted me in bright sunlight said, Salut Galarno. So I can attest to this personally, it was a tremendous success. And how do you analyze it? Why is this book perhaps the most sold book in Quebec's literature? How do you see it? Why?
It is the most sold book, but why did it have so much success? Probably because
Parce que il
if I knew, I would have written two more.
Vous savez, le livre m'a été
You know, this book has been inspired by two things. Family stories on one side, and mostly by my meeting with Maurice Nadeau,
Maurice Nadeau, à qui il est.
to whom I have dedicated. You see it in the beginning.
Maurice Nadeau était un
Maurice Nadeau was a boy my age who worked, well, he didn't work actually. He lived on Saint Laurent Street, playing cards, and what has happened in the film board
ce qui s'est passé, c'est que nous avons
did a movie called À Saint-Henri le 5 septembre in 1961.
en 1961.
In 1961, we were a team. We spent 4 hours in Saint-Henri somewhere about 30 people. We went home with the complete footage that was shot in that village at the time, and then Claude Dutra said, okay, I will do the editing. He was the ace of editing. After 3 months, he comes back and says he cannot make a film for what we have. I was a good employee of the film board. I was given the task to make a film on the security in the Veterans Hospital. Which incidentally took me several times to Ottawa to meet Canadian firefighters, and I found it exciting. And when I saw that Dutra couldn't do it, I said, listen, I'll make a movie out of that. Now let me work. So I edit the film. I write the narration. The film comes out with a certain success, but the merchants of St. Henri believe that we have mistreated them. So they sue me, specifically me, for $1 million at the time. Thank God their lawyer is Mr. Blais, who lives just next to me, so I tell them they are exaggerating a bit, but it becomes important. The Senate gets involved. I am therefore obliged to prepare documents for the Senate. I go see a few senators. It had such an impact that I received a call at home from a certain boy called Maurice Nadeau, who tells me, I work here with a few people in St. Henri. We will come to defend you because we think your film is good. So I invited him to my place, we had a beer, we discussed, and I continued seeing him later because he was my age, but he only went to high school, nothing more. He had a dream to become a librarian. I managed to make his dream reality much later, but I saw him once a month in a tavern. I actually published a book called Homme des Tavernes, and he was funny, he was alive, he had something prominently Quebecer about him, and he has inspired me, the book. The other characters that inspired me, other novels, were probably not as vital, less important, and also less authentic, maybe. But this book, read in Dakar in Senegal, had success with people who thought of themselves as being small, but they wanted to succeed. It is also a book of success, on the condition that someone wants to work and is cautious with those who have already won or succeeded. In the novel, there's a character called Jacques, who basically bears my name. He is a boy working for Radio-Canada, who is a bit miserable, and he gets his girlfriend stolen by someone else. There was a quiet revolution side in this story that is maybe the reason of the book's success. In France, for some strange reason, they say that often, maybe it is the case, they say that it's success due to bad interpretation. The author of the Canard Enchaîne's article that you have read a quote from earlier, the Canard Enchaîne was a newspaper with a big public in France. They believe that in Galerno, they have actually offered me a chronicle in the Canard Enchaîne that I could sign as Galerno, but on the condition of me being anti-de Gaulle. They thought that Galerno would be against de Gaulle. I said, listen, de Gaulle just passed by in Montreal and he said, Vive le Québec, so I couldn't start to attack de Gaulle in your newspaper. Well, the book had success because it was anti-Gaullist. Imagine that.
And it still is on the college's program today. I confess I should have asked the person who quoted from it yesterday what he thought, but that time I was the one interviewed. But anyway, a great success. It's an incarnation in our vocabulary. I never actually knew if we say Salut Galarno because of the book, or the novel has that title because you heard it somewhere.
It's an expression of my grandfather. Douce, not Godbout. It's an expression he used to greet the sun, and I have done a lot of research. A lot of people have done research on this. And the only acceptable explanation I found for this was a film by Pierre Pierrot, presented in France and shot in France, and you could see the people working in windmills, and they were moving. Actually, the windmill is a boat that doesn't move. The sail has to be moved to make a turn and move the windmill. The sail of the windmill toward the wind of Galerne, and the wind of Galerne was a wind from the west that pushed the clouds away. So it was making the sun appear. Is the wind of Galerne and Galarno? Maybe yes, maybe no, maybe right.
Maybe yes, maybe no, maybe rain, maybe snow, mais bon.
But it's the only linguistic explanation I found that makes sense, the only one. There are maybe others. Some people wanted it to be a Native American word.
Ah,
Galarno, well.
a last question. You have, I believe, and I believe you are, you have not contradicted me on this. During your career as a filmmaker, you've started to focus more and more on documentaries. How do you explain this switch from fiction to documentary?
My life at the film board was difficult for two reasons. Pleasant but difficult on an intellectual level. Hard intellectually because we had budgets paid by the states, so paid by the citizens' taxpayers. We made films with the money of others, and I always felt embarrassed to produce films that didn't have some kind of utility. I knew very well that making fiction movies had a certain use to feed culture, but I was not convinced that it was the film board's job to do so. Especially that those working in the private businesses were constantly asking for money to produce fiction movies, and they didn't comprehend, understandably, how a structured government organization could make fiction films very easily. I have made a few. I believe I have made 4. At the end of the day, after having made those films, after having tested the possibilities, if you will, I realized that all my colleagues, at the time I had about 50, were dreaming of making fiction films. To see their name on the front of the movie theater, I said, well, what I have to do now is the opposite. I will produce documentaries, because there is probably less space for diffusion, but there is more freedom in documentaries than fiction. It is less expensive for a reasonable amount paid by taxpayers. I will make documentaries you will have a certain value, I hope. Since that day, I've started making documentary films. In the start, I subjected myself to a sort of objectivity in reporting. I have made many movies with Florian Sauvageau, a journalist on journalism. But slowly as I got older, I have started to get involved in the films as such, and Le Mouton Noir is a great example. It was the era of the Meech Lake Accord. I had just published a book called L'Écrivain de Province, and a diary kept over 10 years. I had just published those that we learned that nothing came from the Meech Lake Accord. So I told the film board, listen, I have been keeping this diary for years. I would love to hold a cinematographic journal because there are more recordings of historical events in the news, on TV. We can see a journalist introducing himself as, what's his name, from Quebec, but we don't see what is happening. They are always showing themselves, but the reality is not there. However, something is happening, so I asked, if you allow me, I've known Robert Bourassa since the age of 8. I've also known Jacques Godbout for several years. His wife was an author, and we ate together at their place, etc. The people who confront each other, I know them very well. Please allow me to create a cinematographic journal of the events that seem very important to me. The death of Meech and the start of something else, research. So I shot for 3 years, edited the film, and then I wanted to solve the issues of the great darkness of Duplessis with Traître ou Patriote. And I also had the film that I probably loved most doing. It's alias Will James, with a Canadian-French writer who has gone to live in a cowboy who went to live in the United States. And all these films grew closer to me, since as I got older, I started to understand that between who we are and the society in which we live, there's an intimate link. If we manage to process it, to produce it, we can leave a trace.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jacques Godbout.
My pleasure.